All right, so kids, we're going deep on Super Bowl LIX this time. And, everyone wants to know who won and all that. But there's so much more to uncover than just the score.
Oh, yeah, definitely. The internet basically exploded during the game, and all that data tells a really interesting story.
Exactly. Like when you look at the search trends, it's obvious people were glued to this one.
Yeah.
I mean, the sheer volume of Super Bowl score searches tells me this wasn't a blowout or anything.
Yeah, you hit the nail on the head there. It was a close one for sure. Actually, even more interesting is the huge spike we see in who won the Super Bowl searches right after the game ended.
Oh, wow. So it really went down to the wire.
Yeah.
Huh? So who ended up winning?
The Philadelphia Eagles took home the Lombardi Trophy.
The Eagles. Okay, so not a huge upset or anything, but definitely a game that kept everyone guessing. But here's where things get really interesting. We also saw a ton of searches for Jalen Hurts Super Bowl wins. And get this was actually his first Super Bowl win.
Oh, wow, you're right. People weren't just looking for the basic facts. They wanted to understand what this win meant for Hurts, Like, was this just another win or a defining moment in his career?
It's like they wanted to put this victory in context, right?
Right.
Was this just another win for a seasoned pro, or were they watching the birth of a legend or something? And speaking of context, those searches for Patrick Mahomes crying after the game really got to me.
Oh, man, yeah. That's rough. You have to wonder what was going through his mind. Were those tears just disappointment from the loss? Or maybe a mix of emotions like pride in how he played? We can't know for sure, but it shows the human side of all this,
Exactly. These are top athletes, but there's still people with feelings and all that. And get this, we also saw a surge in searches for Nick Sirianni crying and Fly Eagles Fly after the game.
It's like the whole city of Philadelphia was on this crazy emotional ride. Sirianni crying probably resonated with a lot of fans because they were feeling that same joy and relief, And Fly Eagles Fly became more than just a song. It was like their anthem, a symbol of the city's triumph.
It's wild how much these little searches can reveal about what the Super Bowl means to everyone. It's not just about what happens on the field, but about the emotional journey the players, coaches, and fans all go through together.
Absolutely. And the search data gives us this amazing window into that shared experience.
Okay, so we know it was a close game, lots of emotions flying around, and a potentially historic performance from Jalen Hurts. But there's one more piece to this puzzle, the coaching. We saw a ton of searches for Eagles head coach and Nick Sirianni all throughout the game.
That's one of the things that stood out to me, too. It wasn't just about knowing who the coach was. People were digging deeper into Sirianni, trying to figure out what his role was in the game, his strategy, what kind of leader he is,
Yeah, it's like people wanted to get inside his head and figure out what he was thinking, why he was making certain calls. Were they trying to find out the secret to the Eagles' success, or were they just drawn to Sirianni's intensity on the sidelines?
I think it's a little bit of both. Remember those searches for Nick Sirianni crying? This is a guy who isn't afraid to show his emotions, and that kind of authenticity can be powerful. People want to know what makes coaches like him tick, how they handle the pressure, how they inspire their teams.
It's like we're seeing this change in how fans watch the game. It's not just about the players and the score anymore. It's about the minds behind the strategies and the personalities calling the shots. It makes you wonder, is this just a trend? Or are coaches going to become more and more important in the world of sports?
Yeah, that's a great question. We're definitely seeing a lot more interest in the coaching side of things. But who knows what the future holds? Maybe it is a sign of things to come.
Okay, so we've got a close game, tons of emotions, and maybe a glimpse into the future of coaching. But hold on tight, because we've only just scratched the surface of this street data.
Next up, we're going to break down some key player stats and those game-changing plays that everyone was talking about online.
Stay tuned, folks, because this is where we really start to dive deep.
All right, so let's get into some of those player stats and those big moments that had everyone talking online. You mentioned those searches for Mahomes Super Bowl stats and Jalen Hurts Super Bowl wins.
Oh, yeah, for sure. I think those searches tell us a lot about what was happening during the game. What exactly were people looking for?
Well, it looks like both quarterbacks played really well, but the searches really focused on Jalen Hurts. Especially as the game went on, searches for his passing yards and touchdowns just exploded.
So it wasn't just about him winning, but about how he won. People wanted to see the numbers, to see how much he carried the team. But we also saw those searches for Mahomes stats, too, even with those Patrick Mahomes crying searches.
Yeah, that's interesting, isn't it? It shows how people were really feeling the game. They weren't just looking at the score. They were thinking about the emotions, the effort, the whole story behind the stats.
It's like they were saying that even when you lose, you can still have those amazing moments, those moments worth remembering. It adds another level to how we see these games.
But it wasn't just the quarterbacks who got attention online. Remember those searches for Jordan Davis? They spiked right around halftime.
Oh, yeah. He's a defensive tackle for the Eagles, and those searches make it seem like he might have made some big plays that changed the game. Like, people were trying to figure out, who is this guy and what did he just do?
Yeah, it's like there's a whole other story happening that we don't see on TV. The average viewer just sees the score change, but this data shows all these little moments that might have gone unnoticed.
Exactly. And it wasn't just during specific moments. Searches for Nick Sirianni stayed high the entire game.
It goes back to what we were talking about before, about how fans are looking at the game differently. It's not just about what's happening on the field, it's about the people behind the plays, their stories. Right, and it makes you think, what is it about Sirianni that people are drawn to? Is it because he shows his emotions so openly, his leadership style, or maybe it's something we can't see in the data, something about how he connects with everyone?
Those are great questions. And it brings us to one of the biggest conversations after every Super Bowl.
Yeah.
The MVP award. We saw some good arguments for both quarterbacks, and even for Jordan Davis on defense.
The search data definitely shows that everyone was talking about it. Searches for Super Bowl MVP went through the roof, especially at the end of the game. Everyone had their own pick.
So who did end up winning the Super Bowl? LAX MVP.
Jalen Hurts took home the MVP trophy.
Jalen Hurts. Like we were saying earlier, people were searching for Jalen Hurts Super Bowl wins, trying to see if this was like the start of something big for him, and it turns out it was. His first Super Bowl and the MVP. That's got to feel incredible.
It really is an amazing accomplishment. And when you look back at those search trends, those spikes for Jalen Hurts MVP and Jalen Hurts Super Bowl wins tell the whole story. People knew they were seeing something special.
You know, it's wild. This whole deep dive has shown us how much more goes on in the Super Bowl than what we see on the scoreboard. We saw all those emotions from the players and fans. We talked about how important coaches are getting, and we even found a hidden hero in Jordan Davis.
Yeah, it's crazy how all those little moments and stories connect to bigger things happening in sports, like how people were so interested in Sirianni's coaching style. Maybe it shows that fans are starting to care more about the strategy of the game.
Or maybe it's just that everyone loves a good underdog story, and Sirianni's leadership really connected with people. And don't forget about those searches for Jordan Davis right around halftime.
Yeah, for sure. It reminds us that sometimes the biggest moments come from the guys you don't expect, the players who might not be superstars but are still crucial to the team.
So as we wrap up this Super Bowl LAX deep dive, I'm kind of blown away by just how much went on. It wasn't just about the Eagles winning or Jalen Hurts getting the MVP. It was about everything that happened along the way, all those emotions and all those little battles that happened both on and off the field.
It shows that even in a game like the Super Bowl, one that everyone watches and talks about, there are always more stories to find, more ways to look at what happened.
And that's what I love about doing these deep dives. The search data shows us what the fans were thinking, what surprised them, what moments made them feel something. It's really cool.
Yeah, it's a great way to understand not just the game itself, but how people connect with sports, how it all fits into our lives.
So to all our listeners out there, we hope you enjoyed this trip through the Super Bowl LAX search data. Maybe you learned something new or started to see the game differently. And who knows, maybe you'll even do some of your own exploring. After all, that's what these deep dives are all about. There's always more to discover. Until next time, stay curious.